Good afternoon. I'm John Hodges, the Assistant Town Manager for the Town of Garner for Development Services, and on behalf of the Town of Garner, I want to thank you all for being here today. The next two sessions that we're going to present together are all talking about opportunities. And we don't exactly have a yellow brick road like Dorothy was just on, but we do have something exciting coming to Garner that I think is going to be transformational for Garner. And right now it's a red line on a transit planning map. You'll hear more about that later, something called Bus Rapid Transit. But before we move to our Bus Rapid Transit and Opportunity Zone session, I want to just give you a visual of how the things that you're going to hear about are actually applicable to Garner and how these two things together may help change parts and even all of Garner. So the image that is on the screen is from our comprehensive plan that we adopted back in 2018. And this was a vision we had for the area around North-South Station. So to give you an orientation, the red line near the top of the map is Tryon Road. And then you can see 401 and 70 split, and the Lowe's Hardware, and that splits right up just to the south of the middle of the screen there. So everything that's in color is a representation of how redevelopment and density could happen at the North-South Station area if some catalyst like Bus Rapid Transit that you'll hear more about later were to happen. This was before we had the other tool you hear about today, Opportunity Zones. And then this rendering is more of a 3D rendering of the dense urban walkable environment that you could actually realize when transit-oriented development comes about around something like a bus rapid transit line. So to tell us about these things today, we've got two panelists with us for the Bus Rapid Transit section that I'm pleased to introduce. The first one is Patel. He's a transportation and land use planner with over 5 years of experience in private and public sectors. And I'm proud that one of Het's most recent year and a half of experience was with the town of Garner, where he served as our first transportation planner. And through his efforts and working with our staff, he helped us kick off a series of projects that are going to be very important to the town of Garner's future. He's now working for the City of Raleigh's Department of Transportation within the Transit Division, and in his role, he serves as the BRT Program Assistant Project Manager for planned BRT corridors through the Wake Transit Plan. We're also happy to have with us today Greg Sauer from WSP. Greg has 17 years of experience in all aspects of transportation planning and traffic engineering. He has led BRT projects across the U.S. for the past 7 years, working in cities like Seattle, Chicago, Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, Nashville, and now in Raleigh. So welcome to Het and Greg.
All right, thanks, John. I'm going to try to stay seated, and hopefully I'm not in your way. If any problems, I'll walk over that way. So as John mentioned, I'm Het Patel, Senior Planner for Transit at the City of Raleigh in the Transportation Department. Most of you guys are probably familiar with the Wake County Transit Plan. In 2016, there was a half-cent sales tax that was passed by Wake County to start thinking about transit. And out of that Wake County Transit Plan, we have 4 big moves that were identified: connecting the region, connecting all Wake County communities, providing frequent, reliable urban transit, and providing greater access to transit. So one of the components of that, of the 4 big moves, or for the 4 big moves, is the Bus Rapid Transit program. And in the MIS process, we had an outreach for Bus Rapid Transit that created a video through the Go Forward process that we're going to show right here.
Our community investment in transit is about expanding access and opportunities for people throughout the region. It helps connect more people to more places in ways that are faster and more efficient than ever before. One of the investments included in the Wake Transit Plan is Bus Rapid Transit, or BRT. This video introduces you to this technology and how it will work in Wake County. BRT is an enhanced bus service that operates more like rail service than regular bus service due to infrastructure investments that make it faster and more reliable. It can use dedicated travel lanes, allowing it to bypass traffic so that it can travel quickly through congested corridors. It can run in a dedicated outside lane or in a dedicated center lane. It can also operate in mixed traffic. BRT also uses traffic signal priority so that waiting time at signals is minimized. BRT offers features like stations instead of traditional bus stops, with raised curb heights that make it easier for everyone to get on board. And off-board fare payment, so that people can pay their fare at the station and board through any door. BRT stations will also feature real-time bus arrival information and other passenger information to help you plan your trip. Together, these enhancements make BRT fast and reliable. BRT service is designed to be there when you need it, so it runs frequently 7 days a week from early in the morning until late at night. This makes it a great choice for lots of different types of travelers, from 9-to-5 commuters to students to people who need to get to a doctor's appointment or go shopping. In Wake County, 20 miles of bus rapid transit infrastructure are planned in some of the most highly traveled corridors in the region. BRT will operate from downtown Raleigh to the north, east, south, and west. The planning process for each corridor will involve determining what roads the BRT line will use and where the stations will be located. Learn more about the investments in the Wake Transit Plan and how you can get involved at goforwardnc.org/wake.
All right, thank you. So, as I mentioned, the Wake Transit Plan had identified those 4 goals of improving transit in Wake County. Part of that is improvements to the local bus service, a commuter rail corridor that's currently also being studied at an alternative analysis level, and then the bus rapid transit corridors. So going further into the 4 BRT corridors, the video talks about how it's a 20-mile network providing connections to downtown Raleigh from Cary, Garner to the north, and then to the Wake Med and New Hope to the east. So all 4 corridors currently have a strong transit market, and numerous planning studies have either preceded this work or we are undertaking some of the planning work as part of the BRT program to further refine the alternatives that were identified in the MIS process. Right now, we are in about the, summer of 2019. So the first part of that schedule that I'm showing is in the works. The New Bern BRT is the first corridor that was identified to go through the federal pipeline. And we are working towards our application for that, which we have a deadline coming up next week on August 23rd for our application for the New Bern corridor. The next part of this process is the other corridors. So between now and summer of next year, we will be looking at the western corridor and the southern corridor and advancing them into further project development phase. And then the last part of that is getting the capital corridor into the project development phase. But the Wake Transit Plan had identified the horizon year of 2027 as a goal for implementing all 4 BRT corridors. So that's the aggressive schedule that we're working with and trying to get these projects into the federal pipeline. As I mentioned, the New Bern corridor is the first corridor that we are currently working on. This graphic's actually really bad to see in the back. So for New Bern corridor, we have multiple alternatives that we've had a public open house on and gotten some feedback, and we're continuing to refine those alternatives as we go towards the application for it. Goes from downtown Raleigh through Wake Med to New Hope, and there are a few options within downtown for where it could be running, which is the right business access lane is what we call it. And Greg will get into a little bit more of the technical details of how BRT functions along different segments. The southern corridor, which most of you guys might be more familiar with, is the one that extends into Garner. There are 3 alignments for that one. South Wilmington Street and South Saunders Street coming out of downtown Raleigh, and then Fayetteville Road, and then a possible South Wilmington Street extension, which would be creation of a new road just west of Tryon, starting north of Tryon and then coming into Garner and coming into North-South Station. The western corridor is the one that connects into Cary, and this is the one where we are starting a western corridor planning study, which has its first open house on September 5th at the McKimmon Center. And it will be looking at further refining the alternatives that are shown here on the screen from the MIS. There are 3 options once you go past Western Boulevard, past NC State, and you get to the Hillsborough, Buck Jones, Franklin intersection. It kind of splits into 3 alternatives going into Cary, and we're going to be looking at those alternatives as part of the planning study. The northern corridor has 2 alignment options. This is the last one that we're planning on taking, I guess, into the project development phase, because there's a lot more to figure out on this corridor, and there are a lot of other corridor studies that are currently underway that are looking at Capitol Boulevard as a whole from a transportation perspective. I'm going to hand this off to Greg at this point to talk a little bit more about what BRT is, some of the features of BRT, and how it can be beneficial to the community.
Well, thank you. My name is Greg Sauer. I'm with WSP. I'm the project manager for the Wake BRT projects that we're doing with Go Raleigh, the city, and a number of other municipalities and agencies in the area. The ultimate goal for us is to take the plans that you saw from HET, help refine those down, and then deliver them in a manner where we can get designs that are consistent with what the community wants, ideas that are going to enhance mobility, quality of life, economic development, things of that nature. And then another big piece of that is actually to leverage local monies that we're collecting as part of the Wake County Transit Sales Tax with federal money. So we are targeting about a 50-50 match of local monies versus federal. The total program cost of those 4 corridors, right now we are estimating about $350 million. So this is not a small project. This is a big investment similar to other types of transit investments that you may be more familiar with. And how do we do it? Just okay.
Just the green, yeah.
All right. Just one button, Greg. Okay, so what is bus rapid transit? My daughter will often tell you bus rapid transit is a way that you can get rabbits quickly around town. Now, unfortunately, I would not be spending $350 million on a service to drive rabbits around, as fantastical as that is. So I just want to go ahead and start. Let's pretend nobody knows what any of this is at all. But it's a bus system. This is something that uses, you may hear the term rubber-tired vehicle, which is just that, as opposed to a steel wheel, which would be your rail car vehicle. This is something that is high quality. This is separately branded from your typical local bus service. The vehicles themselves have amenities and have different special uses. The stations themselves are highly visible, branded, a lot of amenities, as you saw in the video that are there. These are high capacity, so the intent is that you're going to be able to replicate a light rail type of a service. So instead of having to run 3 or 4 light rail cars in a row, you could run a couple buses. There are some buses that we are looking at that are 60-foot long. So a typical bus today in the region is a 40-foot bus. The 60-foot has an articulation or a baffle similar to an accordion, if you will, that connects a second cab that gets pulled behind, gives you extra room for people to stand and bring bikes on. So again, can move a lot of people. It's fast. These go on prescribed routes that have some level of dedicated transit ways. So this may be a lane fully just for the vehicle, maybe a shared lane. In some of the downtown areas, as Het was mentioning, there's a design concept called Business Access and Transit, or a BAT lane. And so again, we're getting back into animals, and that can be confusing, but what that really looks at is the recognition that the easiest way to board a bus is from the curb. And so if the bus is operating along a curb, that's going to be the easiest. But we've got driveways. So we have an application where vehicles who are turning into or out of a driveway are allowed to come into that bus lane, make their movement, and go. What they're not allowed to do is just get in the lane and ride as if they were a bus itself. So there's different ways to share. This is something that's fast also because the number of stations relative to your local bus service is much less, much fewer. I'm not sure which way it goes there, but we'll be looking at station spacing of about 1/2 of a mile. Typical local bus service is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1/4 of a mile today. So just removing stops, the time it takes for a bus to decelerate, stop, open the door, somebody board, your grandmother fished through her purse to get her pennies out, put them in the thing. You know what I mean? Like all that stuff goes away if you just eliminate a stop and take it away. And it's comfortable. So again, this is one that's designed for people to utilize. So there's Wi-Fi and all the other connections today about when's your next bus arriving, some of these things. And it's reliable, which to me, even though bus rapid transit, rapid is in the name, reliable is much more important to me. If I know it's going to take me 20 minutes to get from downtown Garner or the edge of Garner there on the opportunity area to north side of downtown Raleigh, I can make my decisions on using that regularly. It's much easier for me to do that even if it's a little bit slower than if I took my car, because every now and then the car could get delayed and it may take 40 minutes by car. So for individuals who don't have access to vehicles, the reliability is the most important part for allowing people to utilize the service to enhance their quality of life by connecting to employment. So these are some of these pieces. And then the last bullet that's down here is cost effective. This is both for the user itself, but this is also for the system and the region. The incremental costs to do buses and the improvements in the roadway compared to laying actual track down is pretty amazing. Now, some people will say, well, if you don't put track, it's not permanent. And I'm preparing for the developers who are going to ask me questions later here. That is not something that we found. We found that the service itself is really what generates the ridership, and the service is what dictates the use. There will be certainly enhancements at station locations. There's a lot of enhancements that are made to the surrounding pedestrian and bicycle network to provide connectivity, opportunities for park and ride, things of that nature. So when it's all said and done and the physical improvements have gone into place, yes, you could always lift a rubber vehicle and move it somewhere else, but it will be essentially like a light rail for most people as far as how they see it and how it operates. So it's been really, really helpful in that respect. So there's just 6 key items that I would say really make up a BRT system and a way to sort of go around and tell people what might differentiate this from a local bus. So the first is guideways. And this is actually where does the vehicle operate. So a local bus today operates in what we would call mixed flow traffic. So it's just the general lane that everybody's in. You may see on I-40 that you've got the bus on shoulder. So if the speeds are slow on I-40 itself, you may see one of the Go Triangle regional buses driving on the shoulder. So that has a unique guideway. We're looking at different ways of mixing and matching when we can. Exclusive running way for the vehicles. Semi-exclusive, as I described, the business access transit, where some personal private autos can move in and out. And then there will be some locations where from a space constraint or otherwise, it's just going to have to operate in mixed flow certain places. But this is really fun because it's a toolkit. And we can look at a block-by-block basis what is most appropriate, both given the space, the conditions, the land use around it, monies that are available compared to other sections, things like that. The second is the stations and the stops. These are much more impressive as far as a real kind of location standpoint. These are going to be structures that have large awnings. They'll be very heavily influenced by art. Utilize the art to brand a station location as well as the line of a bus rapid transit, even the entire system, depending on where you are. And it can be, from a development standpoint, a real central focal point for development to come up and around it. These are safe locations. These are ones that are visible. There's security. They're made for all different types of people to wait and be comfortable there. And with the frequency of service, you're looking at in the peak AM and PM, probably 10-minute, 15-minute service, maybe 20-minute off. It's such that you can walk to a station, stay there, relax for a couple, 5, 10 minutes, 7 minutes, and jump on a bus because it'll just be coming right by. So you don't have to really rely on a schedule quite as much anymore. The branding is critical. Again, this is to differentiate from the local service because there's unique opportunities. The BRT does get to do some of these different things that the buses would do or locals would do as far as which stations they utilize, how they operate through traffic, if there are designated lanes for them, things like that. And it's something that's really fun. We'll hear a lot about branding as we move forward. I believe there's a study that's going to be coming out in the fall.
Yep.
I always joke with Het that had this been a different type of mode, if it wasn't going to be bus, we would have had to have gone with the Sir Walter trolley. I don't know any way that we would have been able to get out of that. So tried to save some money, didn't work out. The intelligent transportation systems, this is a catch-all for any type of technology that is unique to transportation, in this context talking about the buses. So what you see here is what's called a next bus sign, and you may have seen these. This is very similar to if you're at an arrival or departure gate at an airport. And it just tells you when the next flight is coming. In this case, the next bus is 5 minutes out, or the next one's 10 minutes out, et cetera, things like that. Intelligent transportation systems also allows vehicles, the buses themselves, to communicate with traffic signals. And I believe there was an image of that in the video we saw, and would actually allow the traffic signal to acknowledge that a bus is coming and to maybe extend the green, let that bus get through the intersection before the red time starts. Or if the bus has gotten to the front and is sitting at the front of the stop bar and it's on red, give it maybe 5 seconds of green first to kind of pull out and get in front of the platoon of regular cars. There's a lot of different technology, that are in there. The service plan, I hit on this earlier. This is a service that is intended to be more frequent than your local service and has further spacing in the actual stops themselves. So the hope is we can cover a larger area in a shorter amount of time. And then those station locations, again, at a half-mile spacing, a little bit more, a little bit less, somewhere in that neighborhood, can start to be these nodes for development, for community activity, things like that. And then the final is the vehicles. This vehicle that you're seeing right here, this is a European tram-style vehicle. Now, unfortunately, we currently do not have access to these vehicles due to tariffs and such, but the hope is that a bus rapid transit vehicle is one that really tries to inspire excitement and imagination and gets away from people saying, that's just a dumpy old bus. This is, to the degree possible, a tram or a light rail. It just happens to be operating on rubber tires. So those are sort of the key elements that really make up the bus rapid transit system, and if you're to describe them to someone else. Now, I know a lot of you are here, not just to hear about bus rapid transit, but what does that mean for Garner, and specifically tying into the next presentation about the opportunity zones? Well, economic development is something that has been a big, big plus for bus rapid transit. This is, across the United States, any type of transit work is really aiming at capturing economic development opportunities. And early on in bus rapid transit, there was a knock that it wasn't permanent, and I sort of touched on that earlier, and everybody wants rail, that's what developers want, that's what bankers want, things like that. We found that the service, again, is really what is driving the need for some of this development. And specifically, if I'm going to quote the National Study of Bus Rapid Transit Development Outcomes, this is from the National Institute of Transportation and Communities, to an important extent, the market appears to respond to BRT investments where they improve access to employment centers along routes and where there are opportunities for redevelopment. BRT systems appear to facilitate economic development. I know that there's some really great opportunities to access employment in Garner that are coming online. I know there's a lot of opportunities for redevelopment, and these are all ways to tie together. Even being on the housing side of downtown Raleigh or even the RTP, some of those as the economic, employment centers is a real opportunity. And the most famous United States bus rapid transit system is one called the Health Line in Cleveland. And I'm not sure if anybody is familiar with that one, but it went online in about 2008, actually, thereabouts. Downtown Cleveland was really really tough back then. You could walk through blocks without seeing anybody there, just old buildings, etc. Now, granted, there's the Cleveland Clinic there and the Mayo Clinic, a couple other things up there, but they went ahead and built the Health Line, and this was a catalyst for their downtown redevelopment. And along the extent of the Health Line, from downtown to a couple miles out, they've seen over $5 billion with a B dollars worth of redevelopment along that corridor. Now, am I going to bring $5 billion worth of redevelopment to Garner? No. We're aiming lower. We're going to go 4. We're going to keep it reasonable. But no, the market force is out there and really is something that, again, for a while was surprising to some, but when you really start to think about quality of life, is where do you want to live and what are your activities and what are your, what can you access? If you have a reliable, fast service that provides you that access, you may to yourself say, I'd love it to be rail, but you probably are not going to turn it down if it in fact is not, but provides the same level of access and comfort. So those are the prepared things I had. I figure at this point we might want to have a couple questions. Is that right?
So you need to go to your session now, or we?
I'm sorry.
One
Nope.
question.
One question.
Time for one question.
So on these stations, like in Cleveland, do they have parking lots where people can bring their cars and then get out of their cars and jump on the bus going to town?
Sure. So the question was whether there are parking lots with stations at Bus Rapid Transit. So you can definitely have that. And there will be within the system in the area park and ride opportunities. I would posit that one in Garner here at 401 Split be a pretty good opportunity. But for the most part, we're looking at more of a walk-up style station, which is more neighborhood focused in its nature. But there will be opportunities at some of the end of lines. I think on New Bern, we're looking at a park and ride at the New Hope and New Bern intersection, which is where the Walmart is today, somewhere in that kind of area. So they're very complementary to have park and ride as well.
So I think with that, let's leave them wanting more.
All right.
And see you during the break. Thank you to our BRT
Thank you.
guys.